Who's this guy? Kind of looks like Santa Claus. Wonder what he has to say.
Now, you got a small piece of tape here we're going to look at. Would you tell us what we're going to see here and how you did this and what it's supposed to show?
Well, we've researched Peter Popoff very, very well. And Mr. Popoff, pardon me, Reverend Popoff, is not going to be very happy with this, I don't think. You're going to see, first of all, a short segment of tape as you would see it if you're watching it at home. This is what Popoff featured on his own program. You will apparently see a healing. Now, we went to Houston, Texas, and we discovered that the man was wearing, of all things, a hearing aid in his left ear, and a man who heals the deaf, Popoff himself.
Oh, I see.
And a man who heals the deaf and the blind isn't going to have much use for a hearing aid. One would think if God is speaking to him, maybe someone else is speaking to him. So when we got to San Francisco, we put this fellow, Alec Jason, as an expert in electronics and a surveillance man, and he put a scanner, an electronic scanner on it, and we picked up something interesting. But first, let's look at the first cut of tape.
All right, this is the tape as you would see it if you were watching the show. Okay, watch the monitors.
Who is Harold? I just believe that God is going to burn those cataracts off of your eyes right now. 34788 Foothill Drive. I tell you, the angels are round about your home. Oh, just take those glasses off and put your eyes. If you've got cataracts, if you've got glaucoma, I want you just to put your hand over your eyes as I pray for these precious ones. Sister, you've got eye problems too. Take your glasses off, lay your hands on your eyes. Here it comes to God is going to give these precious ones divine surgery.
Keep my glasses on.
Right now, Jesus.
Oh, God.
That's it. That's the anointing of the Holy Ghost. Praise God. Praise God.
This is the kind of acting.
Through this place.
This is all bro is talking about, I'll tell you.
Thank you, Jesus.
Okay, now let's recap what we've seen here.
Right.
These two people who were there had not met Popoff before themselves.
Never spoken to him.
And yet he calls out his name, and then he called out a number or something?
He called out their address.
Their address.
And they're astonished to hear this, because they didn't tell him. But what you don't know is that his wife has been touring around the audience, getting into conversation. Is Jesus going to heal you today? I see. Where do you live? This kind of thing. And they've filled out healing cards in advance of the program and handed them in. They're now backstage, and someone is sitting at a transmitter backstage. Let's see that same segment again. But now you will have the advantage of knowing what Peter Popoff is hearing in his left ear through a hearing aid.
Jerry Reed.
Is it Jerry?
Reed.
Reed? Is it Reed? Jerry Reed?
It's a woman. She's praying for her husband, Harold.
Who is Harold?
He's got cataracts.
I just believe that God is going to burn those cataracts off of your eyes right now.
They live at 34788 Foothill Drive.
34788 Foothill Drive. I tell you, the angels of God are round about your home.
That's crazy.
Just take those glasses off and put your eyes. If you've got cataracts,
she's got eye problems too.
You've got glaucoma, I want you just to put your hand over your eyes as I pray for these precious ones. Sister, you've got eye problems too. Take your glasses off, lay your hands on your eyes. Here it comes to God is going to give these precious ones divine surgery. Right now, Jesus.
I bet you could teach him chest release.
You know, that is, that's disturbing when you see it.
It is indeed.
You tend to laugh at it, and yet these people obviously are so impressed with what's going on.
Oh, they're absolutely impressed. You see people collapsed on the floor, tears running down their faces, believing that their kids with drug addiction are going to be healed now because he knew their name. He says he's talking to God, that God speaks directly to him because he's an anointed minister, and three things amaze me about that. First of all, it turns out that God's frequency, I didn't know he used radio, is 39.170 megahertz, and God is a woman, obviously, and sounds exactly like Popoff's wife, Elizabeth.
Has he seen this tape, though?
No, he does not know about this until this very moment.
Interesting. Okay, we'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Whoa. right, so that was James Randi, and I don't know if I'm gonna get nailed for copyright on that or what, Johnny Carson show, but I know James Randi would have wanted us to see it, and we can watch some other maybe less copyrighted clips, or we can maybe just go through with some of this in this format and see if I can get away with the React format with this footage. But you may be asking, why are we watching this guy and who is he? So the guy on your screen is James Randi, also known as the Amazing Randi, and he was a magician, but then also he became a professor and a skeptic, and he went around teaching people. Well, we can listen to him in his own words.
I'd like to hear something about the $1 Million Challenge, when it was put in place, approximately how often it's been challenged, and how that all works.
Well, it's sort of a fuzzy period in history. For a long time, it was a $1,000 challenge. Started in 1968 when I was appearing on a radio program in New York City with a parapsychologist who has since then become a very good friend of mine, Stanley Krippner. He worked for the Saybrook Institute in San Francisco. And Stanley is exceedingly naive, and I've told him that many times, so I'm not speaking badly about him at a distance or anything like that. He knows that I'm convinced he's quite naive, but he's basically very honest. He's naive to the extreme, rather, I must say, but he's very honest, and he has many positive experiments, or so he believes. They don't stand the test of time, unfortunately. Well, that's what happens with parapsychology in general. But I believe he's very dedicated and very honest, and I couldn't imagine that he would fake anything or misrepresent anything at all. At that time on that radio program, one of the people present, it might have been Stanley for all I remember, he said, "Why don't you put your money where your mouth is?" And I said, "Okay, all right, I'll give $100 to any of these psychics who say they..." Now, this is 1968. That was a lot more money at that time. I don't know that I had $100, but I hope I did, because I'd hate to be dishonest. You know how I would never deceive anybody. But eventually, when it got to be known and people said, "Wow, you're going to offer $100? I made it $1,000. I didn't always have that $1,000. Then I eventually made it $10,000, and I made sure from that point on, it was getting serious. I always made sure I had the $10,000 in the bank. Now, I will admit to you that every now and then, I'd have to take a couple $100 out of that, but I'd put it back within a matter of days. But generally speaking, the $10,000 was in the bank. Now, that grew over the years until Lexington Broadcasting Syndication, they offered me a show that they wanted to call a $100,000 psychic prize. And I put in my $10,000, they put in $90,000. And so it was $100,000. That was a program with Bill Bixby as the host, as a matter of fact. And I got to tell you one funny episode from that. The astrologer came along, and we put ads in newspapers and magazines all across the country, and we eventually centered it out. We dismissed the guy who said that he could fly by flapping his arms. He literally wanted to go to the window and show us right then. And we were on the 14th floor, so we decided we wouldn't witness that demonstration. Maybe in the next program. Thank you. But the astrologer said that he could tell what sign somebody was born under. I won't get into what that means, but he said if you get people out of the audience that are born under 10 different signs, or 12 different signs, I'm sorry. There are 12, you have to get 12, yes. And they can prove it by their driver's license, you see, date of birth on it. He said, I will be able to sort them out into the 12 different signs of the zodiac. Well, we said, as long as you don't ask them their birth date. No, I wouldn't ask them that. But he did ask some questions. I listened to part of it. When you see motion pictures, do you prefer a mystery over a comedy? And if you're choosing colors to decorate a home, would you choose pastels rather than solid colors or white? And things like this. Do you like hot foods or do you not like hot foods? And it went on and on like this. And at the end of that, he gave them a little sealed envelope. Inside the sealed envelope was their zodiac sign. And if it said Virgo, it had the funny little V-shaped thing on it, and it said Virgo underneath it, and he'd give them that, but it was sealed up. They didn't know what they'd gotten. And he went through all 12 like that. Announced at the end of it that he was quite confident he'd get 12 correct out of 12. And the way we did the thing is we had the 12 zodiac signs set up, a very big set, big studio in Hollywood. Big studio, big set, and all 12 signs were there. The instructions were to the people, come out in a group, stand in the middle. Now open up your envelopes, look at the sign that's inside the envelopes, and go to that sign and stand under the little arch. And they all did that, and they'd look around and they'd go over and stand under the arch. Okay, you all there now? Right. That's the sign that you were assigned to. If that's not the correct sign, go to the correct sign now. 11 of them moved and went to the right sign. 1 out of 12 is exactly what chance would call for. To his credit, the astrologer told me that afterwards he said no, he realized maybe he didn't have the ability to do this. But astrology still works, you say, of course. But he didn't have the ability to do that. And, he really regretted that and couldn't quite understand it. Many years afterwards, he published something where he said, oh, I found out why it didn't. They faked the driver's licenses. So how can you win? But at that program, it was $100,000. Then it became...
All right, so super badass guy, super interesting guy, and so far a real hero of bullshit in the sense that he's putting really putting his money where his mouth is in the service of cleaning up bullshit. So that's where this new series comes from that we're starting here, and it's heroes in bullshit. And the only way to be a hero in bullshit is cleaning it up. And so we've got this theme of Hercules cleaning the stables. So my background is dirty stables because the stables are dirty right now, but maybe one day they'll be clean, maybe not. But in any case, fighting the bullshit is kind of, I don't know, it's its own reward in a way. So I'm gonna go to the questions that we have so far, or the comments, the viewer comments, so we can start getting your tales of bullshit in the classroom, if you will. And particularly, I'm looking for maybe teachers who are using some of the tricks that we're going to be learning about, some of the techniques that James Randi tells us about, that different kinds of psychics and faith healers and other swindlers use. Obviously, having an earpiece and pretending to talk to God isn't, as far as I know, one of the things in the vocal coach toolkit so far. But you never know. So I got a comment from, let's see, from Christopher. Really good news. Says, my teachers weren't part of the kind of group you described, but they all seem to be able to do amazing things with their voices that I wasn't able to learn from them. Well, I don't know. I don't know why, or why not someone winds up developing into a singer, to tell you the truth. Developing into, shall we say, a professional singer. I mean, it's easy to develop into a singer. You're a singer when you start singing. And why not everyone develops in the way that makes them feel satisfied with all of that. But I think it's good to say, I don't know. I'm still looking for a lot of the answers, which maybe would be good for some of the teachers we're going to wind up discussing, maybe not today, but later on in the week or later on in this life. Anyway, so Christopher, cool. Thanks for the comment on the intro. I worked hard on that. I worked all weekend on that. So Paul Montesanti says, I had one lesson with a teacher who was supposed to be some kind of Svengali. Turns out he was just ruining people's voices by teaching weird tongue things and allegedly assaulting female students. Well, yikes. We had some some allegations of assault with the whole This Is Opera, shall we say, debacle or whatever, the fight between This Is Opera and Mr. Opera, which actually Mr. Opera was born out of, oddly. This Is Opera kind of created Mr. Opera, and now Mr. Opera is recreating This Is Opera. So that's interesting. Well, we're not recreating it, I guess. We're like pumping it back up, or trying to breathe some life back into This Is Opera, because it's all these people came together and have this common interest, and now there's nothing happening over there. So it's like, why not have something happening over there? So that's that's us and you. Yeah, so the part that James Randi was just talking about sounds like maybe it wouldn't be in voice lessons, like astrology. And one second. He describes the oh, and by the way, I gotta say, I'm dressed up nicer because you know, rest in peace, James Randi. Just in honor of James Randi, I thought I should wear a jacket or something. Just be a little bit more formal. Because he did die recently. And Christopher, no, I'm not faith healing. I'm gonna put you away here. So James Randi was talking about astrologers, and he's talking about this astrologer who takes his challenge, because his challenge was for $10,000 to prove that they have some kind of actual psychic powers, whatever. And the way they go about proving the challenge is asking them all these kinds of things, like, do they like cold food, hot food, all these things that they associate with the certain signs of the zodiac in their mind, and therefore they should be able to guess the signs of the zodiac by working their way backwards, right? And that seems really silly, but what if you replaced, like, do you like hot and cold foods with questions like, are your vocal folds long or short? Do you resonate more in your mask or in your throat? Or like, where's your first passaggio? Is it between, you know, B and C, or C sharp and D, or so these kinds of questions. And if I took those kinds of questions and then I was like, okay, from this I'm going to predict your Fach, and we put you to the James Randi test. So we'll talk about the kind of test he came up with, and why he's so badass, and why he's Heroes of Bullshit #1. And kind of will always be. And maybe I'll come up with some kind of grading system for other heroes that gives them like 1 to 5 Randys. Like the Randi score could be a way to pay homage to someone who's cleaning up bullshit. I don't know, because this guy was amazing. You'll see. It gets even crazier what this guy did. Yeah, so maybe not crazy teachers, Christopher, like what Paul is talking about, assaulting female students and ruining voices. Although I'm a little bit sus to me, Paul, that anyone was ruining voices. If we go back and we go and listen to them, are the voices ruined? I don't know. you know, I've heard this, like, such and such is ruining voices, but I've never, like, when do you ever meet the ruined voices? Like, you know, like, so you meet someone on the street, you're like, oh, hey, Chris, how's it going? And he's like, I can't talk with you, and then you're like, what happened? He's like, this teacher ruined my voice. Like, it never happens. Or like, oh, where's Mr. Opera? Oh, he's in the hospital with a wrecked voice. You know, he can't talk now because his teacher wrecked his voice. It doesn't, like, it's not really happening. I hear, but you know, people wrecking their voices like teaching kindergarten. That's what'll wreck your voice. That's, yeah, being a mom, or you know, stuff like that. That wrecks voices, I think. But I'm not sure voice teachers. Yeah. So anyway, if no one's got any, if you got this kind of tale, but so far that's mine. My tale of voice teacher who claimed to have magical powers is basically every teacher who ever claimed to know somebody's fach, or every teacher who claimed to have a way to, like, diagnose your fach or predict your fach from some kind of test that they do when you're like a young student going into their studio or something. I think they're not far off from the psychics. Okay, so you guys can you guys can vote or something. If this video's boring you, I could put another one on, but I think I like this. Is a good talk. Anyway, so let's continue here.
$1 million when people started to remind me maybe $100,000 isn't all that attractive.
Okay, so it's going up from what is it, from 10,000 to $1 million. We'll just let him talk.
Sorry, that's all we can manage. You know, $100,000. I only had $10,000 for that.
Ooh,
no, we've got to expand it somehow. Then a gentleman, a very obviously wealthy gentleman, came to me and he said, you should have more teeth to your challenge. And he said, I'll give you $1 million. I thought about that for 20 seconds. And I agreed that would be a good idea. Gave us a check for $1 million. We deposited it in an interest-bearing account with Goldman Sachs. And the provision was that it was called the James Randi James Randi Educational Foundation Challenge Fund. And it was stuck in there, and we can't use it for anything. We can take the interest off the top of it every year if we want, but we can't use it for anything except to award to a psychic who wins it. So it's isolated, it's there. And the people who say, oh, there's no $1 million or anything, we immediately send them the latest financial statement with what that prize now amounts to before we take the interest off it at the end of the year. So it's there. It's been there for quite some years now, and I think it's probably going to be there for quite a while, to say the least. But we're prepared to give it up because we are legally bound to do exactly that. See, when somebody makes a claim, he would have to make a formal claim stating 3 things, and this is very difficult for them to do. What he can do, under what circumstances, with what accuracy. And once we know that, we can design a test of that claim. And he has to agree that the test is fair and square.
Don't you wish we had this in singing? Let's hear that claim, that test again.
It's very difficult for them to do. What he can do, under what circumstances, with what accuracy. And once we know that, we can design
under what circumstances and with what accuracy. That would be the way, wouldn't it? To test whether or not someone's a fraud in basically anything, but either a psychic. But what about someone else who works with the unseen, like a voice teacher, for instance? Interesting that we don't really have that, do we?
Test of that claim. And he has to agree that the test is fair and square, and then if he insists, if he wants it at all, we would have somebody else that we both trust to conduct the test.
I was just wondering if anybody...
But can we imagine that, like on the on the Fach question. So let's say like we took all the teachers and we got them to vote or whatever on what rules and they all agree by some big vote, I don't know, on the rules of it. And they all agree on what it is that you can do, what it is that you can, so predicting Fach, under what circumstances you could predict someone's Fach, and with what accuracy. So let's say you're what was that guy's name? Richard Miller? I think it was Richard, or was it Stephen Miller? I can't remember. Some Miller. There's different Millers. So one of them's like a comedian, the other one's a voice teacher. Famous voice teacher. But anyway, he put out these charts with like where the passaggio is doing something or other and what that's supposed to mean as far as like if you're a light lyric or like a light lyric spinto cavalier tenor or whatever. And yeah, so like Paul is just saying, there's no objective definition for any of this stuff. So they can't. How do they describe? Well, how do they say what it is that they can achieve in the first place? But then they still, it doesn't stop them from giving everybody a Fach and going. They spend billable hours, you know, like time that's getting billed. Worrying about this Fach stuff and what it all means and you know how to figure it out from physiology or whatever. Oh, excuse me, microphone. Yeah, and they're doing all that. And there's no standard, is there, like this for what is they can do under what circumstances? And what was the third one? I'm the worst.
To do exactly that. See, when somebody makes a claim, to say the least, but we're prepared, and I think it's probably going to be there for quite a while, to say the least, but we're prepared to give it up because we are legally bound to do exactly that. See, when somebody makes a claim, he would have to make a formal claim stating three things, and this is very difficult for them to do: what he can do, under what circumstances, with what accuracy.
And with what accuracy?
Once we know that, we can
do under what circumstances and with what accuracy. So, with that's an interesting one, Paul Montesanti. Unfortunately, Corelli didn't have good language, but I think in that case it was Lauri Volpi that was being the douche. Because and by the way, if you read some of the letters, I was reading a letter. I think Corelli was answering Lauri Volpi, and it was, I don't know, it seemed like a weird, not normal relationship, not healthy relationship. Anyway, Lauri Volpi was kind of like a lot lighter than Corelli, not because he had to, but because of what he did. Like, this is the way he did it. The way, like, the technique he preferred for his whole life, whatever, it was stretching the vocal folds a little bit more than Corelli was. In a lot of ways, what Lauri Volpi was doing is easier. In other ways, it's harder, yeah. But you could do this, you know, light thing probably longer than you could do the Corelli thing. Because as an old man, it's going to be, well, it's going to be harder and harder. It depends. You need more strength to do what Corelli was doing than what Lauri Volpi was doing. But Lauri Volpi, I don't know, it seemed to me like not exactly completely healthy personality in those correspondences that I saw with Corelli. Seemed like some kind of weird relationship there that I wouldn't want to be in. Hey, Dylan Hughes, welcome from. We got someone popping in from This Is Opera. How's it going? Welcome, Dylan. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're alive and glad that you're giving us your time today. And Dylan says, my teacher says that I can't be a bass because he hears my voice shift from chest to head at G sharp 3, A3 below middle C 4. Although I have very strong low F2s and even D2s. I disagree wholeheartedly. Mainly disagree because I'm 25 and it's a bit early. Yeah, and Richard Miller. Thanks, Dylan. Yeah, Dylan, I think, I mean, if you got the notes, there's no... So this thing from chest to head is not... That doesn't exist. It's not a thing. It's like, that doesn't exist in science. Chest or head. They tried to find these things so many times in studies. And it doesn't exist. They did find like 4 different vocal modes, and you can find that, and there is such a thing as having the vocal folds thicker for that pitch, or thinner for that pitch. And I guess when it comes to basses, you've got more of a physical limit, because like you got to be able to get low enough. Yeah. But then, yeah, as you get older, that fills out for one. It can't anyway, the bottom. But also, as you're training, it fills out. So why not? I don't know. Like, what happens if you're a bass now, as opposed to if you're a baritone now? Or what happens? Like, you go to the library, and you're like, I'd like to check out this score, please. Let's say you're at a university, I guess. At 25, you might still be in university. I don't know. Maybe you're not in a university. But let's say you go to get your music, and you're like, well, I'd like this, please. And they're like, you can't have this. This is I don't know, baritone arias. You can't have baritone arias. You're a bass. And then I don't know, like what if you like to sing some of the things out of the baritone arias book and some of the things out of the bass arias book? Who cares? Like, you're going to get out there, you're going to be looking for contracts, you're going to get a contract, and you're going to be able to sing what's in that contract or not. No one, and then, I don't know, like, okay, put baritone, put bass, put whatever. And if you're doing both, just put bass baritone if you want. I mean, who cares? It's like it's the dumbest thing. Just, yeah. Yeah. You look at some of the old scores too. Like, they don't even have baritones in some of the old scores. It's like everyone with a low voice. It's like you're a tenor or you're a bass. There's nothing else. So cool, Dylan. Making the big move to the Big Apple. That's awesome. Woohoo! Awesome. That's expensive. New York and cold winters. So I'm gonna check in with Mr. Opera real quick. Okay. So I'm going to take a real quick commercial break, and we'll get back to some James Randi, because I think he's got a lot of really good things to teach us. I mean, I don't think I'm talking about like use this to leave your teacher, but probably your teacher is going to be winding up doing some of these things, and then you can like neutralize them and get the most out of the other stuff that your teacher does. Like because every teacher is almost every teacher is going to be doing some useful stuff and some useless stuff. So I think it's kind of like the consumer's job to get the most out of that time. And yeah, anyway, so let's take a quick commercial break. Yeah, my girlfriend's making me put that. Yeah, she wants me to start teaching and doing all this. Well, I want to, you know, I want to do all that stuff too. But she's making me do the actual, you know, businessy stuff. But that's good. That's good. So Christopher, no. What's going on here? Okay, we've got some. Okay, hey, you guys, take it easy. And in the Mr. Opera chat, I'll put you on the slow chat. Okay, let's see, Paul. Yeah, so Christopher, yeah, I don't think it's true that people can be broken down into 4 or 8 or whatever categories. But I do think you can do that as a casting agent if you need to. I think Fach is it's a shortcut for casting agents. For someone who's you know, like if you want to organize your players and you got a lot of players to organize, something like Fach would be very useful. And then, you know, once you've got your rough organization figured out, you can do some actual thinking. But I think it's a problem that it's like in the universities as like a thing, and it's even, they make it even sound like there's science behind it or something, but there's no science of Fach. Like this vocal fold stuff and Fach, that's not a thing. Hey Carlos. Yeah, oh, okay, I'll bring back the neck veins video. I'll put it in. I'll try to make, I'm getting the hang of this live streaming stuff. So I'm going to take you guys off the screen for a second. And let's hear some more from James Randi.
And a test of that claim. And he has to agree that the test is fair and square. And then, if he insists...
The next thing. So this is crazy. This guy trolled a whole country. Well, let's just watch. I mean, I'll probably get... I don't know if I'll get nailed on this.
A press packet including a book of Carlos's teachings, various glossy pictures.
Hang on a second. Okay. Does it tell us the whole? Oh, thank you, Dylan. That's really cool. You're the first to do it like
including a book of Carlos's teachings,
that's awesome. Thank
various
you.
Glossy pictures, and other paraphernalia was sent to key media figures in Australia prior to the arrival of Carlos.
This is Radio WOP here in New York.
This video shows a New York radio interview with Carlos and one of his Broadway appearances.
Okay, so it kind of drops you in the middle of the story. So what he did was he made up a medium, so like a person who can speak to the two spirits and the dead and stuff. He just like invented them, and he found an actor to play the medium and trained them and everything, and they used the same technique that we saw earlier with the earpiece. So except it was James Randi in the other room that was feeding him the information. And they went to Australia and they did this whole thing. Like they took it. Well, you'll see how seriously they took it and how far they took it before they actually revealed what was going on.
New age celebrity in the United States. The well-orchestrated media campaign began as soon as his plane landed with a full-scale press conference.
Can you give us any idea of what this event might be?
It will be astronomical in nature.
In no time, Carlos and his manager found themselves an overnight success. When the Aussie press tried to debunk Carlos, as they did here on
It will be astronomical
show, Carlos and company
in nature. I'm gonna have to stop. I'm gonna have to start saying that.
Abruptly ended the interview, threw a glass of water at the host, and stormed off the set. That stunt had all of Sydney talking, and within 60 hours...
Okay, so if that's not maybe familiar to you, I guess keep it in mind, is when you want to kind of reduce the questions people are asking, you can be really aggressive. So if you remember all the Jeremiah Silver things that you've come across, where he's just being just super nasty and kind of like over the top. And what's the idea of that? Well, if they're talking about that, then they're not talking about all of the stuff that they could easily look up to figure out that this is a hoax.
Stepping off the plane, Jose Alvarez had made 8 television and numerous radio appearances and had become headline news. But behind the extraordinary saga of Carlos was another story. On the same airplane that brought Jose Alvarez and his spirit Carlos to Australia was another very important passenger, one James Randi, a magician and skeptic, better known as the Amazing Randi. Unbeknownst to the Australian public and media, Randi would pull the strings in what may be one of the greatest hoaxes ever perpetrated upon an entire continent. With the backing of an Australian TV show, Randi virtually manufactured a mystical media celebrity.
All we did is we put him in a white robe. We gave him a big synthetic quartz crystal, because he was a synthetic channeler after all. And he oomed and awed over this thing and screamed and carried on.
I am a very old spirit.
Remember that first press conference? Well, take another look.
Can you give us any idea of what this event might be?
It will be astronomical in nature.
It will be astronomical in nature.
While Carlos spoke to Sydney's assembled media, Randi spoke to Carlos from a concealed room next door, feeding him all the appropriate answers. The seed for this manipulative media campaign was laid back in Randi's hometown of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where he spends a lot of his time debunking so-called channelers. There, he and Jose gave me a behind-the-scenes look at the making of Carlos.
I insisted that if we did this business of creating a channeler, that it would have to be done with an untrained person. As I was talking on the phone, it occurred to me that my friend Jose Alvarez was sitting in the kitchen cleaning an airbrush. So I said, hold on a second, and I yelled at Jose. I said, Jose, you want to go to Australia?
And Carlos was created.
I am Carlos.
Well, we figured that we had to show that the media are irresponsible in that if it
all right,
looks...
so that is so badass. But you get the basic idea. We don't need to watch it to the end to figure out what happened. I can just tell you what happened. He revealed what it was all about in the end, and people were grateful, and probably there's less spirit mediums in Australia, but the whole thing still goes on today, and different kinds of scams like this, still go on today. He uses this phrase that they're unsinkable rubber ducks, but he's just doing something anyway. Like some fewer people will get wrapped up into it. So the problem, I think, with singing is, where else are you gonna go? Where are you gonna go other than these voice teachers to get your information? So I think that's kind of where this Mr. Opera idea comes from. Where if you look at the little Mr. Opera icon, he's got top hat and tails, and he's also wearing boxing gloves. So I think that's a bit what that is. That you kind of have to go in there, not willing to fight against someone, but just for yourself, I think. For your own interests and your own prerogative, and to stay in charge of the whole process. Let's take a look at the comments that we got. Well, okay, so Carlos Realiza. Yes, Carlos. It's a universal signal that you too can be a voice teacher. So if you could probably you could get into the David Jones teacher education program or something like that. No, I mean, obviously you can do that. Yeah, and there's a bunch of great teachers who are. My problem, I guess, is they're like rescuing the whole thing, and a lot of the problems I have aren't actually with the people that are teaching. Well, it wouldn't be if they were teaching something else. So the Fach thing, for instance, think about it from a teacher's point of view. If you are told that it's real, everyone around you acts like it's real. You go and you work for an institution that expects you to teach that it's real. And now they're asking you for your thoughts on how to find Fach or whatever. You're going to give some kind of thoughts on how to find... Like, you're going to... What else are you going to do? You can't fight the whole thing. And that also brings us to one of the themes that hopefully maybe we'll get to it. Maybe James Randi will tell us about it a little bit. The power of belief. I got a bunch of tracks with James Randi here fired up that we can watch. Let's see. There's a little bit.
Let's to the table. Gee, that was very good. How did you do that? June 7th, we'll be offering...
Okay, so he's just doing some magic here. I really recommend going through YouTube.
How they fool themselves. Tonight on Nova, James Randi.
Learning all about this guy, #1 hero of bullshit. Or we could just watch some more stuff. But when...
Now,
let's see.
If I want to create the illusion of this disappearing, it's not too hard to do. And you see, the reason I fool you is that
here he is telling about.
Down here, you see.
Whoops. Where did it go?
Now.
1 second.
James Anthony, welcome to the program of James Randi. He stands as one of the premier illusionists.
This next point that he gives is really great. Let me check in with the. This is opera real quick. So welcome. Let's see, Makis Bubas. Good evening from Greece. Good evening from Czechia, from Pilsen. So let's see. Yeah, Dylan, I would say, I don't know, I have different ideas about range versus brightness. And it really depends on how you're planning to raise the pitch. If you're planning to raise the pitch by stretching, there's like a set of considerations, and there's a different set of considerations if you want to more raise the pitch by you engage the same muscles that would stretch the vocal folds, but then you resist that stretch and you increase the pressure just so, and you wind up raising the pitch, and it's less stable. It's harder to do. You read in the Garcia, that he's saying it's going to be hard to tune and stuff, and Garcia is basically against it. But if you're trying to keep the vocal folds short, then it's going to take longer anyway to do that on a higher pitch. And people who can sing on a higher pitch now by stretching the vocal folds, if their goal is also to sing those same pitches with short vocal folds, and then you're looking at how long it's going to take, it's probably going to take you the same time. Do you know what I mean? So it's like being able to sing those pitches in a different coordination, to me, doesn't tell you if you're going to be able to sing those pitches in a totally different way in the future. Because working towards that isn't, in my opinion, done by singing in a different way. So to me, you start with the function of keeping the vocal folds short, and then you try to raise the pitch. while doing that. And I was able to stretch the vocal folds early on, but it didn't give me any time advantage as far as keeping them short. So, and maybe if I'd known that that's what I needed to do, it could have been quicker. I don't know. Yeah. So I wouldn't be concerned about not having the high notes or yet. So, and then E flat 4 is, and higher is where you need to start tuning the timbre as a tenor. So that's going to be weird. That's, yeah. And hello, Flavia. Flavia started as a mezzo contralto change teacher. She classified you as a soprano, lost all centers, and passaggio was a mess. The Fach thingy helped me out to go back to my real voice. Well, if it helps, it helps. But I mean, as far as like Fach being a set of selections, if those selections are good for you, then it's great. I just don't think that I don't think like a mezzo and a tenor are any more likely to make mezzo and tenor babies, you know, or if you just keep breeding mezzos and tenors together, you're never going to create a race of like mezzos and tenors. It's not, it's, you know, because it's not really, yeah. Anyway, it will be astronomical in nature. Okay, Flavia, okay, you guys, okay, and you guys are having your own discussions there. That's awesome. Carry on. So I'm going to keep going with James Randi here.
Conjurers of the 20th century.
He's going to be kind of...
For a number of years, Randi has been concerned about the numbers of fakers, con artists, psychics, and other folks with magical claims. Noted author Arthur C. Clarke has said the following about Randi. I regard Randi as a national treasure and perhaps one of the remaining antidotes that may prevent the rotting of the American mind. Randi, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here, Tony. I must tell you that quotation from Arthur Clarke got on the back of my book, the first edition, as not antidote, but anecdote. Bad proofreading. So, but Arthur has forgiven me since.
And with magic, with conjuring, with illusions.
Okay.
It goes way back when. I was one of those strange critters known as a child prodigy. I didn't go to public school. They just said, well...
He's talking about his magic background, but I wanted...
Barely remember it. But I was... it was not a happy time for me. I can tell you that. I'm
trying to find the story that he tells about doing a trick for scientists. You know, because you think, oh, I'm smart. I don't have to worry about this stuff. And he's got great...
Now, if I want to create the illusion of this disappearing, it's not too hard to do. And you see, the reason I fool you is that it never left this hand down here, you see. But the reason that I fool you with it is because I look where it's supposed to have gone. And I fold my hand as if I'm holding it there and I'm adjusting my hand to it. But again, it never left this hand down here. But it's because of the psychological misdirection. Now, that's a thing that magicians learn very early on. And as a kid, I learned that. And then I started to see this sort of thing being done on a psychological level, not sleight of hand like that necessarily, by some of the healers and the prophets and whatnot that were coming through Toronto at that time. I'd go to these meetings and I'd say, damn, that's what's in the book. You know, that's what I've been learning as I went along. They're fooling the public the same way I do it for purposes of entertainment. So that was a great lesson to me right there. I found out that other people were doing this to take people's money illegitimately and dishonestly.
So that was a big eye-opener.
So I think with the voice teachers, it's like a little bit of, you know, maybe like a little bit of both. It's like a little bit of the dishonest thing, and then it's only like an enhancement, or sometimes the most of it's dishonest, but then there's still some good little bits in there. So it's like you got to almost go to someone who's going to try to scam you at least a little bit at some point in singing. And you might need something from that person. So it's a little bit, I guess it's a little bit complicated. I think with the whole Jeremiah Silver thing, it was a little bit different. That was kind of exaggerated. It's like, well, come on, that guy's insane. So anyway, yeah.
Oh yes, yes, that was a great revelation to me.
Now, I know that you prefer not to use the word magician. Why is that?
Well, because magician, by dictionary definition, it's loosely used in the United States. The better word is conjurer, or the real pronunciation is conjurer. A conjurer is one of the definitions, and the one that I use is a person who uses the skills of misdirection and trickery to produce the effect of genuine miracles that could be done by a magician. And a magician, by definition, is someone who uses magical, supernatural forces to create effects, to do things, to actually do real magic. And I don't recognize that there is any real magic. Maybe puppy dogs and Sophia Loren come close, but not quite close enough.
So you went on from there, and obviously you became a professional.
Yeah, I met Harry Blackstone, Sr., the old man. I went, since I was not in school, I could, don't tell anybody please, but I could go and see matinees on Wednesday afternoons at the Casino Theater, which is a burlesque house. Yeah, it's one of those things. And I saw shows that maybe I shouldn't have, but from the top balcony, the cheap seats. And the stage came back down to the couch in which she lay just a moment ago. And he would intone to the audience, "You see this young lady?" And I sat there astonished. I thought, it's either hypnosis and...
kind of losing it a bit. He's talking about this process of learning from the old guys, which we do have in opera. And then another cool thing to notice is that actually magicians and stuff, and conjurers as he calls them, and opera and clowning and all that stuff all come from the same background, all come from the same historical practices. The mummers and mimes and jesters and all these groups that were kind of unsavory parts of society. So we still kind of have that whole, that whole flavor, I guess, to us.
Under the tutelage of a number of professionals who didn't formally tutor me, but they would.
1 second.
Brilliant, as always. And I was the closing act. I got out of the milk can. I took a whole mouthful of water, you see, so that I could spit it out of my hand and throw it, walk through there on top. And I've got brilliant. I got to be very friendly with Alice, Vincent Fournier from Phoenix, Arizona, and a really nice guy who does it. And I've got this mouthful of water, and I hear a voice directly above.
Oh, well, I'll have to cue it up next time. But he tells a really interesting story about some physicists tell him that they just witnessed an actual miracle. A guy do an actual miracle, and he tells them, well, explain to me says to one of them, explain to me what he did, because there's no such thing as like real magic. And the physicist is like, no, I'm a trained scientist. This is the real deal. And so he gets him to explain the trick to him. And he says, hang on a second. And he says to his assistant, go to the library and get this book and get this trick. And he gives him the name of the trick from the book. And the other guy, his assistant guy, knows exactly what he's talking about. And he goes and he gets it. And says, make a photocopy and send it to this guy. So he sends it to him. And then he gets a phone call. Well, and he as he's on the phone, he sends it to him, and they're discussing, and he starts reading it, and then the guy just goes quiet, and then just hangs up the phone because he's so embarrassed. because he's supposed to be this, you know, like a brilliant scientist. And there he was getting swindled by a magician who was doing a trick with matchbooks, with matches that was like straight out of a book. So basically cheap tricks. And what I want to be looking at a lot on this channel is some of the specific, and what we've been looking at on the Bullshit Inspector, for instance, is some of the specific techniques that get used by teachers. And there's one that really interests me more than the others that psychologists use. And James Randi calls this technique cold reading. And cold reading is when you go into a psychologist, an astrologer, or a psychic. I hope I didn't say psychologist. I meant psychics. So when you go into a psychic and you start to answer their questions, they'll ask you, you know, I'm getting something that starts with M. Is there something that starts with M? And they take you through these guesses, and they're getting information from you, and they're taking the information that's visible from you on the outside anyway. So your age and all that stuff. And they're making a series of what he calls high probability guesses. And he uses these same techniques for doing his magic tricks, where he, you know, guesses crazy things that you wouldn't think would be possible. You think, well, there's got to be some kind of psychic powers there, some kind of magic. And I think that there's a really, really, really strong element of this in the voice teaching business. So what I'm trying to get people to do is just notice the patterns, and then just ask yourself as you go on if you're seeing that pattern. You might not be, but also you might be. And some of the really, really kind of foundational things, the fundamental parts of classical vocal pedagogy, might be encouraging it. And I think in particular, this Fach thing. But there's other elements. So later this week, I'll be looking at a video on finding your true voice. And that's another, it's nothing like what James Randi is talking about in terms of tricking someone into thinking you can guess, or that you have psychic powers and that you can know something that's unknowable. And yeah, you know, when it comes to Fach, it's not only that. There's something to be said for, like, oh, you know, you've been doing these particular coordinations and you prefer that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this use of the Fach concept to try to predict things that normally you would need to take some kind of measurement to predict. So, or taking some measurement and then running it through the Fach theory or system theory, and then coming out with some prediction for the future, or some diagnosis for what you're doing. So I think those are different things. But I think if we start paying attention to people like James Randi, maybe we can educate ourselves a little bit better as consumers. And then when we go in to see that teacher, we're not so naked. We're not projecting our own needs so much. So I don't know, how many of you who are, shall I say, having a negative reaction to the idea that your teacher could possibly be using some of these techniques. So how many of you would say that you went into your teacher with a vulnerable feeling, or a feeling of being desperate or needing to be saved or having some kind of crisis? So I'm going to check, let's see in the comments if anyone... No, I don't see it. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Dylan, the conservatories, I think the issue is, I don't know, like, what's your opera education worth, actually? I mean, how much... You don't make that much money singing opera, probably. Or you can make more teaching opera. But that's... I mean, how long can that go on, where the teaching business keeps growing and then the singing business keeps shrinking? But the thing about school, like, if it wasn't so expensive, they would be awesome, because you have the gym and you have the library and you have all these things you can access that you can't easily get in normal life, I guess. So, and it's a real shame, because schools could be like the best place to develop. But yeah, and I think though the problem is we want the schools to be better, so we don't want them to be swindling, doing a basically very polite and very sophisticated version of the scams James Randi was looking into. Right, we don't want them doing that. But at the same time, we want them to give us pretty easy answers about what's going to happen. So nobody wants to, for instance, put in 2 or 3 years trying to be a spinto tenor, for instance, without some kind of guarantee that they can do it. But you're never gonna know until you actually do, if you actually like that, and you can't just try it, you know. And I think the people who are trying it and it's quote unquote just working right away, I don't see that. I do see some people who can get a metallic sound pretty early, but I don't see anyone kind of covering all the obstacles. And it's like everyone's got some difficulty, it seems. Yeah, and some more serious. So Dylan says, but I will say there are far less gimmicks from my teacher and more serious anatomically focused technique. He's at least honest instead of telling me things I want to hear rather than... That's awesome. Yeah, that's just great. And you know, the thing is that I wonder too is we have this whole concept of the teacher, and it's a little bit like your psychic in the sense that you wouldn't have like 2 psychics. Oh, I go to 2, you know, your psychic is like your psychic and your teacher is your teacher. But it seems to me like a singer who is working on their singing is the main thing that's happening. And then if there's a teacher, okay, there's a teacher. But I see people without teachers that are making great progress, and I see people with teachers who are not making progress. And I don't think it matters who the teacher is. It's like you always get a sense like, oh, if I could just show them this or that, but that's not a good way to predict who's going to be able to do what, it seems. So it's a big crisis for vocal pedagogy, classical vocal pedagogy. I mean, we ask like what's wrong. We have this whole This Is Opera channel because of a crisis in opera and everything, and it's like, you know, there's no easy answers. Like, really, obviously, this old school stuff is not the answer. They keep selling it as the answer, and it's like every year the results are worse and worse, and then every year they're saying, see how bad the results are? That means we have to do it more. And it's like somehow they just use this misdirection that James Randi talks about, and they get us to believe for one more generation that what we need is just the right teacher, and then we can fix it. But I'm not sure. I think it's more like we need the right students, and then maybe we can do something about it. So, yeah, this has been Mr. Opera, and thanks for joining me, everyone. Dylan, let's see, Flavia, Christopher, Adrienne, Makis, Paul, and Carlos. Thanks for joining. Not a whole lot to say this evening, so I'm going to stop after an hour. I just really wanted to show you my cool new intro. Really, because I made this cool new intro. So I'm going to show it one more time before we go here. So this is Philippe, Mr. Opera, signing off on This Is Opera and Mr. Opera, and for rest in peace, and we love you, James Randi.